developing a strategy for creating affordable student housing solutions. What's that about? This is a project I've been working over the summer where I want to create and find the solutions to create affordable student housing solutions for my campus, but not only student housing, also solve other problems such as homelessness or problems such as the lack of housing for senior living, affordable senior living. And that's something I will talk about over the next few minutes. So, what am I trying to do? I am trying to create a profitable, affordable housing, which means I want to create and do affordable where it's cheap and people can afford the rents, but also profitable. One of the reasons why we do not have as much affordable housing today is because of the profitability issue. Affordable housing isn't profitable. It's that simple. And because it's not profitable, we don't have investors and people developing those projects. Because guess what? If it's not profitable, investors are less likely to invest in those projects. And because they are less likely to invest in those projects, developers and constructors will not build these projects. So how do we get around this project? How do we get around this problem and attempt to solve this issue? So the first thing is to make affordable housing profitable. Perhaps we're not going to be able to make this. We're not going to be able to make it super profitable compared to the best and highest rates that private investors might get. Well, we might be still somewhat attractive to some investors. Perhaps we're not going to appeal to all investors, but perhaps we're going to appeal to people who want to do good, impact investors, investors who want to make money, but also leave a mark, leave a legacy, and leave a world a better place. My solution is rooted in creating profitable, affordable housing. According to economic theory, supply and demand determine the prices of goods and service. To decrease the price, we increase the supply. To increase the price, we decrease the supply. It's not a coincidence that real estate investors, love markets where the supply is limited, where there's not a lot of room to build and develop more housing. Because guess what? The supply isn't really limited. Therefore, when the supply increases, they're not going to be able to charge as much, or even perhaps the rent might even decrease because of the new supply. My solution intends to increase the supply of housing in the market to create competition and lower the prices of other housing. When I first started working on this project, I wanted to see to understand the assumption why the price of things, of rent and apartments, were the price they were. Why was that? And I found that it's a combination of a couple of things. If we believe in economic theory, we say that the prices of things, it's in the equilibrium of supply and demand, and if the prices are the way they are, it's because people are probably willing to pay for those things. Assuming that's true, then the prices should be the way they are, and I should not be wasting my time recording this. But perhaps that's not true. Perhaps that's the wrong assumption to make, and perhaps we need a more thoughtful and deep discovery in order to find the underlying assumptions here. And that's where I went from understanding why the prices were the way they were, to coming up with a solution that it's quite interesting, because it's a solution that doesn't rely on government and subsidies of any kind. I do not want to rely on government or grants or any sort of like that, because I want to make something that's scalable, something that could be replicated across the world, across the nation, across college campuses. The way affordable housing is done today is usually by government subsidies. My solution relies on the visible hand and visible hard work to create the technology and build the solutions to fix this problem. Perhaps a lazy solution would be to just rely on government subsidies or do nothing about it. But I do not want to do that. I do want to find a solution that doesn't rely on that and work my neurons to find and make it profitable so it becomes attractive and therefore would attract investors to make this happen. My approach is based on 3 pillars. Number 1, like I've said many times, profitability. Why? Attract developers and investors to make it happen. Number 2, building. We will be using the next generation of materials and innovative materials that could be perhaps installed in one day. This is interesting because that means that I would not need as much financing, because I would get the money to invest and build the houses. Then I would rapidly start getting the money back through renting. And number 3, I will say, and how I think about this, about number 3, is something I call Curiosity Land, inspired by Tomorrowland. People will come for the prices, but stay for the community called Curiosity Land, which is a community of determined builders and doers and dreamers and people who want to solve the most important problems in the world, with spaces for innovation like scientific labs, 3D printing, hackathons, and really it's a way to meet and get to know people through working on hard, interesting, real world problems. Many of us are thinking about other things, are thinking about making friends and finding other people. But I think the way to find other people is actually to work on things, and people will come. But it's also a place to actually have fun, to have the real fun. Fun can be many things. But the real fun, it's partly working on projects, but also having a place where people can actually have parties. No, fun doesn't mean going in a bar and getting drunk. Fun means having a type of ecstatic music that makes your heart and your body to be alive with so much excitement. Sort of what happens where we have sort of these parties in like Europe. I think it's called Tomorrowland and stuff like that. And I think that's something that could be done. And again, people will come for their prices, but stay for the community. In the world today, people have 3 basic needs. Something you would call, if you were to ask yourself, what would it be sort of the basic needs to have a human life today? I would think there are 3 basic needs composed of food, healthcare, and housing. Everyone needs to have those 3 in order to have a basic human life. Those 3 things are perhaps one of the hardest problems in today's society. Going to Mars is pretty challenging, but solving the food and healthcare and housing issues are perhaps as challenging or even more challenging. I can only imagine what it would be to re-engineer these problems in a future society Mars, and I'm so excited to see that happen. So housing is one of these problems. Our world needs to solve these problems to create more equity and common good about us and about ourselves. I'm starting with college housing because it's a problem I'm facing, a problem I want to solve, and a problem I want others to never even think about. I will work with my blood, sweat, and tears to make this possible. And when it becomes successful, I want to make the solution widespread across college campuses. Then we can start using this solution that is scalable to solve homelessness, senior living, and create a more equitable place in the US and the world. But now, we start with college housing, in my own very own college campus in Urbana-Champaign. And I hope you can join me. Thank you. Up next, we have an interview with a person that I admire a lot and that I learned a lot over the summer. My mentor, Dr. Julia Freyboit, originally from Germany, who came to the US to study real estate. She holds 2 degrees, a master's and PhD in real estate, and as you can imagine, she has learned a ton about this industry, and she taught me so much about this industry, not only about what assumptions to make, what assumptions to understand, and really understand both sides, because I need to understand the investor sides, but also the consumer sides. And the following is my conversation with her, where we talked about not only the affordability in housing, but also future solutions. How about flying cities? And also more realistic things. Why don't we have more affordable housing? And why anyone has not solved this issue. Enjoy. And up next is my dear mentor, Dr. Julia Freyboit, who kindly helped me work on this project by meeting with me on a weekly basis. And she was a fundamental part in this project because she really helped me understand the real estate market at a fundamental and deeper level, as she holds and has a master's and PhD in real estate. And really, she helped me make the right assumptions and also understand those assumptions behind those things. So welcome, Dr. Julia Freyboit.
Thank you.
The first thing that is important to talk about is why do you think there are a lot of affordable housing currently today?
And that actually comes down, it's a very good question. And that's one of the biggest problems that the US and actually emerging and developed countries worldwide are facing. And the biggest issue here is a supply and demand issue. The problem is that the supply of affordable housing is, looking at it from an investors and developers point of view and from a capital point of view, not lucrative, because the ability to increase rents to achieve a certain return that is required by investors is very difficult in the affordable segment, if not even impossible, especially when it comes to development, which is much more risky than just purchasing an existing building. And so because it's so much more attractive for developers and investors to build luxury units, just because the return is higher, there has been much less development activity in the affordable housing segment. And that has led to a shortage of housing, not just for students, but also for seniors and workforce housing in general.
Yeah, I always remember something you told me in one of our first meetings. It was that if you really wanted to solve this problem, it was a matter of finding a way to increase the supply in a different and innovative way. And I think this is where this project might come handy, because it might be a way to solve this supply question. And really, even if my approach is wrong, I think going in that direction might help us get to where the quote unquote right
way and approach to do it would be.
Exactly. And your idea of actually, because obviously, if as a landlord, as a developer, as an investor, you cannot increase rent, then the construction side maybe decide to actually make those projects more profitable and more attractive to investors. So if your rental income ability is limited, well, maybe because that is the other component of development, the costs are driven by factors such as, labor, construction material, zoning laws and permitting process. And so, yes, maybe in the affordable housing sector, there's not as much room to increase rents to make it work for investors and developers. But on the other hand, maybe there is an opportunity to actually look at innovative building materials and processes and look at the cost side with regards to developers, generating a certain return. So yeah, so your approach actually is a very interesting one. And yeah.
So something that another thing that we talked about was that where do investors usually go? Like, where do developers invest their money? And in a big, a really big way where people go and invest, and where people usually like to go, like big investors, is usually big complex like apartments, skyscrapers and stuff like that, usually built by REITs, which stands for Real Estate Investment Trust. Could you tell me more about why that is so profitable for them, and why are they so inclined to doing these big projects?
Yeah, and with regards to investors, the majority of real estate investors are actually what's called private investors. So they, for example, pool funds from high net worth individuals, the high net worth individuals themselves, as opposed to REITs, which actually they're public and private ones, but the really big ones, they are publicly listed companies and use the stock market to raise capital. And the reason why all sorts of different investors, whether it's institutional investors such as pension funds or REITs or small individual investors, do prefer the type of developments that you talked about and investments you talked about, is because they're usually located in markets that are in high demand by households and individuals that are able to pay those high rents, because those are locations that are very desirable with regards to amenities, that have a lot of job opportunities. So think about all the big urban markets that are really hot and have been really hot long before COVID. New York, Chicago, San Francisco. Those are markets that big investors are very interested in, because they have a draw to young professionals, to people that generate a high household income, and of course can pay higher rents for luxury segments. There are also markets that are very restricted with regards to the supply of land and ability to build new buildings. And that is actually what you want as an investor in a place. Limited supply for new construction, because that reduces rents going forward and values, obviously, but also a strong economic base and, a lot of population, affluent population, and, lots of draws to that for that population to move to that location as well. So that is why usually urban locations, especially in what's called primary markets or gateway markets, are so desired by investors.
And this is just an example of many examples in our system where we have misaligned incentives.
Yes. Now, COVID is really interesting because it has changed it a little bit. Suburban has become, and smaller locations, smaller towns have become more desirable, because obviously now there's the ability to work from other places. But that, of course, just now has moved the affordability crisis to those smaller locations, secondary, tertiary cities. So it doesn't necessarily alleviate the affordability issue.
Yeah, that's sort of like a problem that we'll always have, because we're sort of built, we build horizontally and not always vertically, and space is limited, especially in an urban area like in a city like New York. It's limited. You have the ocean right next to it, and then you have other things in the city. And then you can always go so far down like horizontally, right? And then vertically, it's messier. You need to get permits, and it's just hard just to get, where house used to be, and you just build up. And I really wonder where, I don't know, like innovative projects could be. I would even think that maybe like a city that is like sort of like a drone type of thing that is like in the sky, and then maybe like the houses would be there and then just go up in the atmosphere. I don't know, like a mini city like that. I don't know if you've heard something like the sea steering. Have you heard of that?
I haven't. I mean, those are really interesting visions, and you're right that actually, especially in high-price locations, density is a solution. And you would be surprised, even in lower density locations, density. So actually increasing the height of buildings, putting more units in a building, actually is a way to increase affordability, not just for rental, but also for example, for in a buy segment. So people that want to buy a condo or townhome. And that opens a whole new can with regards to single family zoning and, you know, other issues that we don't want to touch. And they're like also with single family, other issues with regards to, you know, development activity and all of that. But of course, single family and multifamily are connected because obviously people move in and out of, you know, rental apartments, depending on life cycle stage. But yeah, there may be opportunities going forward where, you know, just thinking very creatively of how we use space, whether it's for living or for, you know, commuting or whatever, can be, you know, optimized. I haven't seen too many developers talk about it yet, just because it's just too much out there. But I agree with you. Part of getting over this affordability issue is to think creatively of how do we provide housing.
So going back to the affordability housing, specifically for college students, that's where, you know, it's a big problem. I think you mentioned that at the place that you work at, Portland University, there was the same thing going on. And, you know, here it's a little easier because it's a rural area and we have, there's opportunity to build because a lot of corn and stuff like that at farms, and those farms could be bought out and so on. But Portland, right, it's a city that's limited.
Yeah.
The supply is limited and the investors love that, like you said. So, and of course, if it's easier to just find those places where supply is limited because the money will be there. And that's, like I said, that's an example of where incentives are not aligned with, you know, consumers and investors like interest. So 2 questions.
Yeah.
The first one, why has anyone sold this before? Like what are some of the assumptions, or what are some of the reasons why anyone hasn't solved this problem? And the second question is related to the other one. How can we align the incentives of the consumers and the investors to solve this problem?
Yeah. And this is a good question. I think part of it is that this problem is so complex and involves so many moving parts, you know, from the cost structure of developers to land costs to zoning processes to how capital markets think and how investors think, that it's just very difficult to find a solution to this problem. In fact, you know, traditionally, affordable housing or housing for workforce was heavily subsidized, was provided publicly just because that is so much easier because it's so difficult. But yeah, part of it definitely is to get investors on board. Now, the great thing is we live in a time where in commercial real estate and just in the general finance industry, you have more and more what's called socially responsible investors. And for example, or impact investors that are interested in more than just the financial bottom line. So there are investors that are actually willing to take a below market return in return for doing good, whether it's affordable housing or other projects. So it may be actually a good time to approach this topic again, not just from the innovativeness with regards to building materials and cost structure, but also, you know, maybe finding investors that are willing to invest in this problem and solving it. It's just, yeah, so from the capital market side, there is a little bit of rethinking, but we're still not there because most investors still will always go for the projects with the higher return, which usually are not the affordable housing projects. So it's just a very complex, and then, you know, even if you found investors that are willing to accept a below market rate return, you had a really innovative building system. In a place like Portland, land values are so high that may actually kill the project, or, you know, zoning restrictions maybe on the permitting process may take so long that is totally unfeasible for a project. So there are so many different components, and aligning them all it's just so difficult that it's really challenging to find a solution. But and I know there are lots of people working on it. There are people trying crowdfunding to actually raise capital. So basically accessing a large number of smaller investors that may just invest $500 or $1,000. But again, there are also challenges with regards to setting those type of vehicles up. So yeah, it's just very complex, and there are lots of parties involved that don't necessarily talk to each other or, you know, see the world the same way. So yeah, it's challenging. And what has been created after, for example, tax incentives, if you build affordable housing, and there are a couple of approaches, but they're often very complicated and complex and restrictive. And most developers just prefer to build market rate because it's easier, you know, in terms of financing them, returns. So yeah, it's very complex.
Yeah,
I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And you know, even if investors were interested in impacting social change, they still need to get some return, because
Yeah.
they just don't have they don't have in unlimited money, right?
Yeah.
And that's where
yeah, absolutely. And you know what's very interesting is, and this is not just true for individuals, but also even for, you know, institutions. People think in two worlds. They think about investments and return and donations. So you may have an investor that, you know, goes for the high return investments, but then on the other hand donates to an affordable housing project or something. But like this impact investment idea is actually relatively new for a lot of investors. It's like investing, but also doing good, because it used to be traditionally separated. So that is also something that needs to be a little bit overcome, just this rethinking that, you know, you can have both.
Yeah, I think it's in a super like position of like being like also wanting money, but also like,
Yeah,
like donating. I just quickly, do you know why, like where that came from, or like why is such a like it's become more relevant lately?
the impact investment.
Right.
Yeah. So that is kind of interestingly, it has been going on for a couple of years, and it's part of a bigger awareness of the triple bottom line, or, you know, like companies need to be environmentally friendly, socially responsible, and also need to have a strong governance. And that is driven by, believe it or not, millennials and Gen Zers actually as well, that are much more socially and environmentally conscious. And a lot of people as consumers or employees or even investors want to buy from, work for, or invest in a company that also does more than just make money. And so it's actually a trend that has been going on over the last couple of years, mainly driven by millennials and now also Gen Zers continuing that, forcing companies to just rethink those type of things.
Yes, that's a question I've been thinking about, because I don't really understand it. I don't know how to make sense of it. If you see across job boards, there's this thing about impact, community, culture, and it comes to a point where these words become quote unquote meaningless. Because they throw them around, but is there actually any difference? And if you don't say those words, people are not going to apply to do the jobs. So I don't really understand what's going on there. But so in this case, just a bigger thing that also.
Yeah.
But in this case, there needs to be something like that involved in this project, because those are the people that will be consumers and also the investors in this case, and that's where we need to align sort of the incentives here.
Yeah. And you know, maybe the solution to providing more affordable housing is a combination of innovative building materials, you know, innovative zoning and permitting processes, innovative financing solutions. The only thing we know that as it is right now, it doesn't work. So there needs to be a lot of innovation in a lot of different areas that belong to this development process, that, you know, need just to be a fresh look on, okay, how do we solve this problem? And, you know, this is, for example, also where technological innovations such as blockchain could come in, that allow to easily, you know, invest in it and use like non-traditional ways of having a partial ownership in a building as an investor, for example. So I know there are also people working on that already and looking at, okay, what technological ways can we use to actually also reduce the costs that are involved with finding investors, for example. So yeah, so lots of innovation is needed to solve this problem.
Yeah, I think the hardest and biggest problems are usually problems of integration.
Yeah.
Putting things together. And this one is just an example of this one.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And integration is tricky because you need to get all these things together and integrate in the right way. And I guess this also comes where what I'm studying something similar, like systems. So you need to like understand systems and everything. So maybe I'm destined to solve this problem. But even if I'm not, I'll try to solve it anyway. But
absolutely. And who knows? You know, I'm very hopeful of you and your generation in general in solving some of the problems that we have. And it just takes a fresh look at things, and I don't know, just
you know,
figuring it out. and as you say, it's different systems, people talking different languages, having different motivations, and just bringing them all together and making it work. So absolutely, as you say, it's different systems.
And usually like fresh perspective that are usually ignorant like me, who don't really understand how massive this problem is. And because if I knew how tricky this thing is, I would never like do it, because it's gonna be pretty tricky. Because I'm so ignorant, I don't really care, and I go step by step until I solve the problem.
Yeah.
So
and it's so as you said, I have a bunch of degrees in real estate, and even for me, finding an answer to this problem is like, so far I haven't found it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would be like being out there and doing it. So you're right. It's like probably one of the most complex problems that I can think of out there. And there are so many different factors that we haven't even talked about that play into it. But sometimes it actually needs somebody that has a fresh a view and like may not know enough about it, and comes in and is like, wait a minute, why haven't you thought about this? Or what about that? So who knows, maybe you will find a solution. And yeah.
I mean, I think two things. First, you have to be ignorant, and number two, you have to actually try and be willing to
exactly
see what's out there.
Exactly. And maybe you don't find a solution, but maybe you find something else along the way, like have a Teflon moment. So yeah, you never know.
Yeah, maybe it's not for housing, but maybe it's for something else. And
exactly,
that's the exciting part. But at the end, I think as long as you try and fight the entropy of things, I think you will find something interesting out there. So
exactly. And what matters is trying and caring enough about these topics. And again, you may not be able to solve them, but at least you tried. And again, who knows what it leads you to.
That's the exciting part. And I have to say, I'm really grateful for all your help and learning from taking all the years of study and experience that you have done, and learning from you has been, and it will be amazing, because I'm way too young, and I have not learned and done all the things you've done, and having just the opportunity to just jump on a Zoom call and get everything about like real estate in this problem. It's such a key that I'm super grateful. And I really want to thank you for your time, because I know you're super busy, and just to talk to me, who's this guy is trying to solve this problem, who has never done it before. It means a lot for me. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And up next, we have a conversation with a student from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign named Savannah, which I wanted to interview her to understand her current living arrangements and really understand my future user of someone who might be interested in living in such a place, such a community. And in this conversation, we talked about the real cost of living in university, as well as all the anxiety and all the challenges, unnecessary challenges that come with it. I hope you enjoy it. Hello. Welcome, Savannah. How are you?
I'm great. Doing great. How are you?
I am doing great. So to get started, please tell us your age, your major, and your current living situation.
So I am 19 years old. I'm a sophomore in electrical engineering, and currently I live in an apartment near campus.
So the next 8 questions I'm going to be asking you could be a little sensitive regarding financial information. So if you don't feel like disclosing this information, please feel free to do so. And the reason I'm asking you these questions will be merely for research purposes for the research project I've been working on over the summer. Like I told you before, we were out of record. So the first question is, how much do you pay monthly?
To live, I pay about $495 per month plus utilities, including electrical and water.
Which would be about how much?
About $560 per month.
All right, almost 600. Perfect. And then who do you live with? Do you live with anyone? And if so, how many people do you live with?
Yeah, so I live with 3 roommates. Yeah, just 3 people that I met in college last year.
Awesome. So are you guys all paying the same amount or something else?
Yes, we all pay the same amount.
So it would be about 600 times 4. That would be about 2,400 per month or so.
That's about right, yes.
That's about right.
Mhm.
And how, if you had to estimate how, I guess let me ask you a more personal question. Do you feel like the apartment is do you feel comfortable in your apartment?
I do feel comfortable, yes.
Do you feel it's the right pricing?
I think any university pricing for housing is going to be a little bit expensive, a little bit increased because we are on a college campus. So for what I'm paying, I think I'm getting a pretty fair deal.
Why do you think that is in the sense of why do you think because we live in a college campus it has to be more expensive? Like shouldn't it be cheaper because we have more people, therefore we also have the demand to build more apartments, therefore we should have more supply, which means for any reason it should be cheaper. And especially where we are in Urbana-Champaign, and for those of you guys who don't know what that is, that's literally in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, surrounded by cornfields and farmers. Farmers are great, but those farmers are great because they can sell the land to build more things. But if anything, the apartments and the housing should be cheaper.
You know, I would think so too, because it is a little bit weird because even driving here, I remember thinking, okay, well, there's nothing. You just start driving and there's nothing. There's just cornfields, like you said. And then you get here, it's like this bustling hub of students and everyone moving and going places. I think too the demand comes from wanting like this quote unquote luxurious housing, right? There's these really expensive apartments that offer different amenities like study rooms. You can live in a suite with like your friends, but you each get your own individual bathroom, things like that. And I don't know, you think it would be a lot more simple to find housing, but it's really not. It took my roommates and I about 2 months to find an apartment, even within our price range. So I definitely wish there was a solution for that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems in society and something that everyone needs, and it's sort of like they're very rudimentary, is that any human being needs 3 basic things: housing, food, and healthcare. And I feel like those 3 things are sort of like the forgotten things to solve, and sort of like the things that we actually need to solve. We want to have a better society with progress. So a lot of the things, in this project, one of the things that our 3 pillars could be considered affordability, meaning that you wouldn't have to pay $600 a month. I think we're estimating about half of the price for a quote-unquote comfortable apartment that would be furnished and everything else. But beyond that, we're not just going to have cheap affordable housing. We're also going to have other things. And one of the things is a community of people who are ambitious, who are dreamers, who are doers, and who want to do things. And one of the things that we will have will be 3D printers. We'll have hackathons, and all these things to build things and get together people who live there to build things. Because not only we would live together, but we would work together. Do you think you have found that sense? I mean, would you feel identifying this community? Would you be interested in being part of such thing?
Yeah, so I think that's a really cool idea. I kind of love the idea of, being able to build this real community of people. Because even my roommates, I know them, right? But I don't think we're all on the same wavelength all the time. We have different interests, different state of minds. And even though I think with a community like that, of course we're still going to be different people, have different state of minds. But we're coming together to kind of create something greater. And I think that could be really awesome. And especially what you said about like making things and building these together, like 3D printers and doing all this stuff. And I think that'd be really great and affordable and most likely like the most optimal living community for our college.
One of the things that I joke sometimes is that people come for the price, but I stay for the community, and it's something that I am really striving for. And a point you said about your roommates is that sometimes it's okay to be different. It's okay to be in different wavelengths, but I think when people have nothing to think about or worry about, they start worrying about things that are not necessarily quote unquote real. And when we actually get together and work on a really important problem in society, then we can actually become really good friends and form those quote unquote bonds that people want to form. And another thing, so our triple pillars are the following: affordability, the community, and there's something called Curiosity Land that was inspired from Tomorrowland. So we say we live together, we work together, but we're missing something. We also play together. That's something that in many college campuses we're sort of missing. How do people have fun? Well, they do certain things. They go to certain bars and they do these things, but that's boring. I think we need we need progress in how people have fun. And I think one of the things that we sort of need to have this ecstatic moment of fun and these things. And I was inspired by Tomorrowland, where we have actual places to have fun, and not just these things that they think they're fun, but no one really wants to be there. So you said you like the price, which is great. You said you like the community. I'm not gonna say if you feel inclined to have this fun, but do you feel like you have fun in your college campus?
So I think people have different ideas of fun for sure. Like you said, the bars. A lot of people in college, they think that's the only way to have fun. In order to be considered cool, you have to go out to the bars, you have to drink and do all these different things. And a lot of people don't actually have fun that way. They do it because they feel pressured, right? And I think for me, the real fun on college campus is kind of figuring out, all the different things there are to explore. Like, even here at on my college campus, they're having a kind of like a resource fair and a thing they call Quad Day on Sunday, which is like when all the clubs and activities, like, they show you exactly what's going on campus, how you can get involved. And I think that's the real fun, figuring out what your real interests are, figuring out how you can get involved and how you can involve the people you care about, all the people you meet. And I think that's how you build a real community for yourself, and you kind of explore your curiosity, like you said, like Curiosity Land. So
it's definitely a big problem to solve, but a big problem I want to solve. And that's what I would like to do: create a community of more ambitious people who want to create these projects, and not ambitious in the sense of wanting to do more, but being more. And being more interesting people is what we need to solve in this society. Thank you so much for coming to this interview. Before I say anything else, would you have to say anything else? about the matter, or anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what you create. I'm really excited to see what comes out of this project. I think this sounds great, honestly. It's very creative. It's something that I think a lot of people don't even think about. So I really hope it works out, and I really hope you're able to explore your idea more.
Thank you. I will surely try my hardest with all my blood, sweat, and tears. Thank you so much for coming.
Of course. Hope to do it again soon.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation in this project. If you like to help, if you like to encourage, or if you like to invest, please visit my website at Juan David Campolargo, or add me on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram, where I can be easily contacted. I would love to end this conversation with some words from Brian Johnson. You don't know what big goals are worth pursuing until you've uncovered the new building blocks and understood their properties. Here's a big question. The serial hunter mantra. What concepts are hiding in plain sight but cannot be seen by anyone? How do we, with a limited human cognition, start thinking from an alternate dimension? Thank you so much.